The ground shook with thunder, but it wasn't the sky. It was the sound of cannons, muskets, and war drums pounding across Yoruba land. For 16 long years, the forests and villages of Western Africa echoed with the cries of battle. From 1877 to 1893, the Yoruba people fought one of the bloodiest and longest civil wars in African history. A war not remembered in school books. A war that tore families apart, brought kingdoms to ruin, and turned once proud warriors into shadows of themselves. It began with whispers of betrayal and ambition. Ibadan, the military powerhouse, versus Ekiti and Ijesha, allied under the banner of survival. Armies clashed in endless waves, and when the dust settled, the land itself seemed cursed by blood. For 16 years, no one was safe. No home untouched. Entire generations grew up knowing only the fire of war, and in the middle of it all, a battle that would change Yoruba land forever. Why did this war rage so long? Who were the men that turned the soil into ash? And why does history barely whisper their names? This is the haunting story of the Kirigi War, where victory was hollow and survival was the only prize. The Yoruba were not strangers to war. For centuries, kingdoms like Oyo, Ijesha, and Ekiti rose and fell in cycles of conflict and alliance. But by the late 19th century, something darker loomed. Ibadan, a city forged by warriors, hardened by battles with Fulani jihads, had risen as the dominant military power. Their generals were feared, their armies seasoned, their ambition relentless. They demanded tribute, submission, and obedience from smaller Yoruba kingdoms. For the Ekiti, Ijesha, and their allies, the weight was unbearable. Taxes grew harsher, humiliation deeper. Families starved while Ibadan generals grew richer. Resentment brewed like fire beneath the surface. By 1877, the spark was lit. The Ekiti Parapo, a coalition of smaller Yoruba states, rose against Ibadan's might. They sought freedom, dignity, and survival. But they underestimated the fury that Ibadan would unleash. The setting was Yoruba land, a vast stretch of towns, forests, and farmland. Its people were skilled traders, farmers, and warriors. But as the first muskets fired, this land of culture and trade became a graveyard. At first, many thought the war would last a season, perhaps a year. But soon, the conflict spiraled into something no one could have imagined. The drums of Kirigi beat louder and louder. And the people knew this was no ordinary war. The Kirigi War escalated with brutality unmatched in Yoruba history. Ibadan sent wave after wave of fighters, confident that sheer force would crush their rivals. But the Ekiti Parapo were desperate, and desperation breeds resilience. They fortified their towns, dug trenches, and learned to fight not as subjects but as survivors. Battles stretched into stalemates. Villages burned, crops rotted in the fields. Famine stalked Yoruba land, killing as many as the guns. Whispers carried through the camps. This war is cursed. Soldiers vanished into the forests, never to return. Entire towns awoke to silence. Their men slaughtered, their women and children scattered. Still the war dragged on. Ibadan would win a victory, then lose it. Ekiti would push forward, then collapse. For 16 years this cycle repeated, each side too stubborn to yield. At night, the skies were lit with fire. Warriors sharpened their blades under torchlight, while elders begged the gods for mercy. The people began to wonder, was this truly a fight for freedom, or just another cycle of endless death? And yet, the climax had not yet come, because one battle, one final clash, would decide not just victory, but the future of Yoruba land itself. The year was 1893. The ground at Kirigi trembled as the largest armies ever assembled in Yoruba history faced one another. On one side, Ibadan, its warriors dressed in red, their chants echoing like thunder. On the other, the Ekiti Parapo, their ranks filled with men who had lost fathers, brothers, sons, and still refused to surrender. The battle raged for hours. Muskets fired until barrels overheated. Spears clashed. War cries turned into screams. The very air seemed to burn with smoke and gunpowder. Eyewitnesses recalled that the earth itself drank blood until it could take no more. And then, silence. Both armies, exhausted and broken, could no longer fight. 16 years of war had brought nothing but death. What followed was not triumph. It was not glory. It was the realization that no side had won. The Kirigi War ended, not with victory but with exhaustion. The aftermath was devastating. Yoruba land lay in ruins. Towns were burned, fields barren, families shattered. Tens of thousands were dead. Generations lost. The British, watching from the shadows, saw their opportunity. As Yoruba states weakened, colonial power grew stronger. By the turn of the century, Yoruba independence was a memory, buried under the ashes of Kirigi. The war had been fought for dignity, for freedom, for survival. But in the end, it opened the door for a new master, the British Empire. And so, the greatest tragedy of the Kirigi War was not simply the lives lost. It was that in fighting each other, the Yoruba people made themselves vulnerable to a far greater enemy. 16 years of bloodshed, only to trade one chain for another. The question remains, was this war an act of resistance, or the first step in a greater conquest that would silence Yoruba voices for generations? Perhaps the true legacy of Kirigi is not just the graves it left behind, but the haunting reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are lost long before the first shot is fired. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold true crime histories.